Somewhere beneath you, 11 kilometers down, the ocean floor is still moving. Not quickly. A few centimeters a year. You won't feel it. No one will. But it is happening. Right now, while you lie still. The same slow press that has been making the deepest place on Earth for 50 million years. Tonight, we follow it down. Not to the bottom of the ocean. To the bottom of something quieter than that. Maybe the day left something behind in you. A weight you haven't named yet. A speed you haven't quite come down from. Let it be here. You don't have to put it anywhere. You don't have to understand it tonight. Just let your body remember what it already knows. How to settle. The way silt falls in deep water. Not rushing. Not trying. Just finding the floor. Tonight, we're going somewhere most of the planet has never seen. A place where two pieces of the Earth have been pressing quietly against each other for longer than we can hold in our minds. Not in conflict. In the slow, patient work of making something. We'll go there gently, one layer at a time. If tonight felt like something worth returning to, a quiet subscribe keeps Sleepy Ocean close. No rush, no pressure. Now, let's begin. The Mariana Trench did not happen. It is happening. Right now, as you lie still, the Pacific Plate is pressing beneath the Mariana Plate, slipping under it, millimeter by millimeter, not pausing, not resting, moving. A few centimeters a year, the width of a finger, no more than that. We think of the deep places of the Earth as finished. We imagine the ocean floor, the way we imagine stone. Already arrived, already settled into what it is. But the Mariana Trench is not a scar. It is an ongoing act. Two plates, one bending beneath the other. This has been happening since before our species existed. It will be happening long after we are gone. Right now, tonight, it is happening. And the trench is a few atoms deeper than it was this morning. No one measured it. No one needed to. The plates don't require witnesses. They simply continue. A crack in the floor of the ocean, still opening, slowly, in the dark. The deepest point in the Mariana Trench is called the Challenger Deep, 11 kilometers down. Sit with that number for a moment. Not to understand it, just to feel its weight. 11 kilometers. Mount Everest, the highest point on land, rises nearly 9 kilometers above the sea. You could lower it into the Challenger Deep, and it would disappear completely, with more than a kilometer of dark water still above its peak. But even that comparison doesn't quite reach it, because Everest we can see. Everest we can point to. Everest catches light. The Challenger Deep has never caught light, has never been pointed to from above. It simply exists far beneath the surface, far beneath the place where light fades, far beneath the place where even darkness feels familiar. 11 kilometers of water above it. Every meter of that water pressing down. And below all of it, a floor. Flat, cold, still, waiting for nothing, expecting nothing, simply there. A place so far beneath the world that the world from there cannot be imagined. Just depth and more depth, and then floor. At the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the pressure is approximately 1,100 times what you feel right now. 1,100 atmospheres. Let that settle. Your body at this moment is already holding pressure. The weight of the air above you. The gentle resistance of your own cells. You don't feel it as pressure. You feel it as nothing. Because everything inside you is pressing back. Balance. At 11 kilometers down, that balance becomes something else entirely. The water presses in from every direction with a force that would collapse almost anything we build. Early vessels designed to reach the bottom had to be shaped as spheres, not cylinders, not boxes. Spheres. Because the sphere has no weak point. Every part of its surface receives the pressure equally, not fighting the depth, not resisting it, simply accepting it, distributing it, becoming one with it. A steel sphere lowered slowly through 11 kilometers of dark water. The ocean pressing in from every direction, all at once, with everything it has, and the sphere holding, not because it is stronger than the ocean, because it has learned the same shape as surrender. And below that sphere, below everything we could build or name, the dark, light reaches approximately 200 meters into the ocean. After that, it begins to fade. By 1,000 meters, there is no sunlight at all. The Challenger Deep is 11 times deeper than that. We use the word darkness as though it describes an absence. A room with the lights off. A sky without stars. But the darkness at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is not the absence of light. It is something older than light. Something the light has never touched. Something that has been itself. Completely, uninterruptedly itself. for 50 million years. In all of human history, fewer people have visited the bottom of the Mariana Trench than have walked on the moon. A handful. The darkness has been there for 50 million years. And yet, something lives there. Small things, slow things, creatures that have never seen light, never needed it, never missed it. Moving through the dark, the way you move through a room. You have always known, without hesitation, without fear, at home. A place that has never once been touched by the sun, and full, quietly, slowly full of life. And that life lives in cold. Near the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the water temperature is just above freezing, between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius. Cold, but not frozen. This is not a coincidence. Cold water is denser than warm water, heavier, and heavy things, given time, sink. The water at the bottom of the Mariana Trench began its journey at the surface, near the poles, near ice. Cold enough, heavy enough to begin descending. And it has been descending ever since. That descent takes centuries. The water that is resting now at the bottom of the Challenger Deep, that water last touched the surface perhaps 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years of falling, slowly, through layer after layer of warmer water, through darkness that deepened as it descended, through cold that settled into something permanent, arriving finally at the floor, not rushing, not knowing it was arriving, just becoming still. Water that touched the surface in the time of the Crusades, that has been falling through the dark ever since, and is resting now, tonight, at the bottom of the world. The floor of the Mariana Trench is covered in sediment, a soft, fine layer that has been accumulating for millions of years. It comes from above, from the surface of the ocean, where microscopic creatures live and die and begin to fall. Their shells, their skeletons, their small, weightless bodies drifting downward. This is called marine snow. It falls slowly. A single particle, the size of a dust mote, may take weeks to fall 1 kilometer. Weeks for 1 kilometer. 11 kilometers. Weeks multiplied by 11. Weeks of falling through complete darkness, through cold that increases with depth, through pressure that builds and builds and builds, and still falling each particle falling alone, each one the remains of something that lived briefly at the surface, in the light, not knowing it would end here, in the dark, at the bottom of the world, and the floor receiving them, one by one, without hurry, without preference. The way the earth receives everything eventually. A slow white drift, descending through the dark. Each flake the shell of something small that once lived in the light. Falling still. Tonight. Right now. And through that falling, sound. The deep ocean is not silent. Sound travels through water differently than it travels through air. Faster and farther. Much farther. There is a layer of the ocean, roughly 600 to 1,200 meters down, where temperature and pressure combine in a precise way, a way that bends sound inward, traps it, holds it, inside the ocean's own depth, the way a valley holds an echo. Sounds that enter this layer can travel thousands of kilometers without losing themselves. A whale singing off the coast of one continent can be heard near the shore of another. The deep ocean is full of sound we have only recently begun to hear. Whales, the grinding of tectonic plates, the low, continuous moan of the ocean floor, shifting under its own weight. Sound that has been traveling for days, for weeks, arriving at a microphone from somewhere unimaginable, carrying news from the other side of the world. A sound moving through dark water, unhurried, for thousands of miles, arriving finally at a place it never meant to reach, still intact, still itself. For most of human history, we believe nothing lived. In the deepest parts of the ocean, the pressure was too great, the cold too complete, the darkness absolute. We were wrong. Life exists at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Small crustaceans, curved like questions, have been found there in abundance. Thousands of them, moving through the dark, through pressure that would stop a human heart, through cold that is barely above freezing, and microbes, microbial life in the sediment of the deepest floor, living on chemicals, needing nothing, we would recognize as a resource, not surviving despite the conditions, surviving because of them. The amphipod does not know. It lives in an extreme place. It simply lives, finding what is there, using what is given, moving slowly through the dark. The way anything lives, the way everything lives. When it has learned to want only what is already present, a pale creature smaller than your thumb, drifting through 11 kilometers of dark water. Unhurried. At home. Beneath even that creature, the floor itself is moving. The Pacific Plate is the largest tectonic plate on Earth. It covers more than 100 million square kilometers. And it moves. Slowly. A few centimeters a year. About the rate your fingernails grow. Where it meets the Mariana Plate. A smaller plate. Holding its ground. The Pacific Plate does not stop. It bends. Not breaks. Bends. And descends. This is called subduction. The Pacific Plate slides beneath the Mariana Plate and sinks into the mantle. The deep, slow, half-molten interior of the Earth. It is being absorbed. The plate that once was surface becomes interior. The hard becomes soft. The cold becomes warm. The crust returns to what it was before it was crust. This has been happening for 50 million years. The Pacific Plate, moving a few centimeters a year, bending, descending, being taken back. And the trench above. The gap left by that bending, remaining, deepening, still. Two plates, one going slowly beneath the other. No drama, no sound we could hear. Just weight and time and the slow willingness of one thing to go beneath another, and between them, the deepest place on Earth. In 1960, two men descended to the bottom of the Challenger Deep. The vessel was called the Trieste, a steel sphere, small enough to feel impossible, attached to a float that would carry them down and then back up. The descent took nearly 5 hours. 5 hours of falling through darkness, through cold that increased, with every meter, through pressure that built around the sphere that held them. 5 hours. With nothing to see, nothing to do, nowhere to go, but down. And then the floor. They stayed for 20 minutes. 20 minutes at the deepest point on Earth. Then they began to rise. Another 3 hours and 15 minutes. Back to the surface. 8 hours and 15 minutes in total. For 20 minutes. At the bottom, two men in a steel sphere at the bottom of the world. The ocean above them. All of it. Holding still. We have always needed a name for the places we cannot reach. Scientists have a name for the deepest parts of the ocean. Depths below 6,000 meters. The Hadal zone. From Hades. The underworld. It is a fitting name. Not because it is frightening, but because it is genuinely beneath everything else, below the abyssal plain, below the deep sea, below all the named and studied layers of the ocean. The place beneath the places. There are other Hadal zones scattered across the Pacific, each one a trench, each one a place where one plate has agreed quietly to go beneath another. Each one full of life. We named it after the underworld. And yet, something is always moving there. Something small, something unhurried, something that is never needed. Another name for home. Right now, while you rest. The Mariana Trench is doing what it has always done. The Pacific Plate is moving. A few centimeters this year, the same as last year, the same as every year, for 50 million years. The marine snow is falling. Somewhere above the floor, in the complete dark, a particle the size of a dust mote is drifting downward. Slowly, through cold water, through pressure, through silence, toward a floor it has never seen and will never leave. The small pale creatures are moving through the dark, unhurried, unaware of being observed, unaware of us at all. The cold water that left the surface 1,000 years ago is resting now. Still, at the bottom, none of it needs your attention. None of it is waiting for anything. The trench was there before you were born. It will be there long after. It simply continues. 2 plates, a gap between them. Dark water, cold, marine snow drifting down through 11 kilometers of silence. A pale creature moving slowly across the floor, not knowing the depth, just moving. At the bottom of the trench, there is a layer of sediment, not rock, not sand, something softer than either of those words. The remains of things that once lived in the water above. Shells too small to see without help. The skeletons of creatures that spent their whole lives near the surface, in the light, never knowing what was beneath them. When they died, they began to fall, slowly, not the way a stone falls, the way a thought leaves you before you can name it. Drifting sideways sometimes, caught by a current, released again. It takes weeks, sometimes longer. 11 kilometers is a long way to fall when you weigh almost nothing. And while it falls, the world above continues. Seasons change. Other creatures live and die and begin their own slow descent. By the time one particle reaches the bottom, everything above it has already moved on, but the bottom receives it anyway, quietly, without ceremony. It settles onto everything that came before it, onto the layer from last year, from 100 years ago, from before this ocean had its current name, each layer thinner than a piece of paper, each one a different century. The sediment at the very bottom, the oldest layer, pressed down by everything above it, has not moved in millions of years. Simply there, held, a book left on a shelf, so long, no one remembers who put it there. The page is still in order, the words unchanged. Dust on the cover, soft and very still. In that stillness, something moves. There are creatures in the trench, the size of your hand, pale, almost translucent. If you held one up to light, and there is no light there, so this is only imagining. You might see through parts of it, the faint outline of what is inside. They are called amphipods, and they are not rare in the trench. In the deepest places, where almost nothing else survives, they gather. When something falls, a piece of wood carried down by current, a whale that has finally completed its long sinking, the amphipods find it. No one is certain how. The trench is vast and dark, and the distances are enormous. But they find it. They have been found, deeper than almost any other creature, with something like a nervous system, deeper than fish, deeper than almost everything. And inside their bodies, scientists have found traces of the surface world, compounds from distant rivers, particles that traveled hundreds or thousands of kilometers before entering the ocean, before sinking, before arriving, finally, in the body of something that has never seen the sun. The trench receives everything. Whatever enters the ocean, whatever drifts far enough, sinks deep enough, arrives there eventually. The amphipods carry the surface inside them without knowing it. Without knowing, there is a surface, a letter that passed through many hands before reaching the right one. The envelope worn soft at the edges, the words inside still meaning what they meant when they were written in a different place a long time ago by someone who could not have imagined how far it would travel. The trench carries more than what falls into it. The largest single-celled organisms on Earth live in the trench. A single cell. We learn early that cells are invisible, too small to see. The basic unit, the smallest thing, that can still be called alive. But in the trench, that rule bends. A single cell down there can grow to the size of a grape, sometimes larger. Scientists are still working out exactly how this happens. The pressure, the cold, the particular chemistry of water that has not seen light in a very long time. Something in those conditions allows a single cell to become what should not be possible. And it does not announce this. It simply grows slowly in the dark, doing what cells do, persisting, holding their shape, continuing, but on a scale that has no reason to exist, except that here, in this place, it does. There is no explanation. That makes it feel less strange. It is strange. And it is real. And it sits on the floor of the trench right now. This moment. A single living thing, visible to the naked eye. If you were there to look, which no one is, it does not need to be seen to be what it is. A single drop of water caught in the fold of a leaf after rain has stopped, not moving, holding its shape against gravity a moment longer than you'd expect. Round, complete. Still, this place has a name. There is a name for the deepest known point, Challenger Deep, named for a ship, a British research vessel that crossed these waters in the 1870s, long before sonar, long before satellites, long before any instrument that could speak to itself and return an answer. They used a rope, a weighted rope, dropped over the side of the ship, paid out slowly, hand over hand, into the water. They waited. The rope kept going, longer than they expected. Much longer. When it finally went slack, when the weight touched something and the tension changed, they marked the length and then they pulled it back up. That took time too, a long time. Standing on the deck of a wooden ship in the middle of the Pacific, hauling a rope back up from a depth that had no name yet. The number they got was hard to believe. They measured again. The ocean did not change its answer. It had been that deep, long before anyone arrived to ask, long before ships, long before rope, long before the idea of measuring something that could not be seen. The trench simply was open. The way a valley exists before anyone walks into it. The way a word exists before anyone speaks it. Already there. Already itself. A door. That was always a door. Before the word door, before the idea of opening, before anyone stood on the other side and reached for it. Just a door, already leading somewhere. The water that fills it carries its own kind of history. The water at the bottom of the trench is not the same as the water at the surface. Not just colder, denser, compressed slightly by the weight of everything above it. Different concentrations, different dissolved gases. Water moves through the ocean in vast, slow patterns. A circulation that takes centuries to complete. Surface water cools near the poles, grows dense, sinks, and begins a journey along the ocean floor that may last 1,000 years before it rises again. The water at the bottom of the trench may have last touched the surface 500 years ago. Some of it longer. It has been in the dark since before certain countries existed, since before certain languages were written down, since before your great-great-great and many more greats grandparents were born. It entered the dark and stayed, held down by its own weight, cooled to near freezing, moving but barely, a slow drift along the bottom that would take lifetimes to perceive. It does not know it has been gone a long time. It does not know there is a surface to return to. It is simply where it is, filling the shape it is given, resting at the lowest point available. Still, a room no one has entered for a very long time. The air inside unchanged. The objects where they were left, not abandoned, just quietly keeping everything exactly as it was. You would expect the deep to be silent, and in some ways, it is. No wind. There is no wind 11 kilometers down. No surface. No place for air to move against water, for water to pile into waves, for waves to break against anything. None of that. The motion that exists there is slow, pressure-driven, the kind of movement you would not feel if you were somehow there. A drift so gradual, it would seem like stillness. But the trench is not without sound. Earthquakes move through it, not as violence, but as long, low waves that travel through rock and water at frequencies far below what you could hear. The groan of the Pacific plate still pressing downward. The adjustment of stone that has been under pressure for 100 million years and is still settling into place. Scientists have recorded audio there. What they captured is not silence. Something lower than silence. A presence in the sound. A register you feel more than hear. The way you sometimes sense a large space before you see it. Not for anyone. Not performed. A house at night. The slow tick of cooling wood the settle of a foundation, finding its rest. Sounds that have nothing to do with being heard, that happen because things that hold weight for a long time eventually let something go. There is something in the trench that does not belong there. Researchers have found it in the sediment, in the water column, in the bodies of creatures that have spent their entire lives in the deepest dark. Creatures that have never been near a coastline, never been near anything made by human hands. Microplastics, particles from objects manufactured decades ago in places far from any ocean, carried to rivers by rain and wind, carried to the sea by rivers, broken apart by sunlight and motion, into pieces too small to see individually, and then carried downward, slowly, by the same forces that carry everything else to the bottom. They were found in amphipods at the deepest point on Earth. Inside them, the trench receives everything. This too, settled into the sediment, alongside the shells and the skeletons and the centuries. A stone dropped into still water a long time ago. The ripples, long since gone. The stone, still there. On the bottom, in the dark, exactly where it landed, the deepest fish ever recorded lives in the trench. The Hadal snailfish, small, pale, the kind of pale that comes from generations of living without light, where pigment serves no purpose, and the body slowly lets it go, almost translucent in places, the faint shadow of what is inside, visible through the skin. It was not expected to survive at those depths. The pressure alone, at the deepest points, interferes with the chemistry that keeps cells functioning. Proteins fold in particular ways to do their work. Pressure at that intensity would unfold them. And yet, the snailfish has adapted. Its cells contain compounds that stabilize proteins under conditions that would destroy almost anything else. Not quickly, not dramatically. Over millions of years, in the dark, under pressure, the body found a way to remain itself, to keep its shape, to keep its chemistry, to keep going. The footage that exists of it, captured by cameras, lowered on long cables, shows it moving the way. Something moves when it is entirely at home. No urgency. It drifts near the bottom, unhurried, the way you move through a room. You have lived in a long time without thinking about the walls, without thinking about the floor, just moving. Because moving is what it does. A figure seen through a window. On a winter evening, the room behind them warm, the glass fogged slightly at the edges, not doing anything remarkable, simply there. In the place that is theirs, we have barely looked. We have better maps of Mars than we have of the ocean floor. Mars is far, hundreds of millions of kilometers, depending on where both planets sit in their orbits. No human being has stood on it, and yet we have mapped it carefully, patiently, over decades. Its mountains, its valleys, its plains and craters, named and measured and recorded. The ocean floor is here. A few kilometers of water is all that separates us from it. And yet the deep ocean, especially the trenches, remains largely unknown. At any meaningful resolution, we have outlines, depth measurements, photographs from specific points, but the full texture of the floor, its ridges, its small rises and depressions, mostly still uncharted, the deepest place on Earth, less familiar to us than a planet no human hand has ever touched. The edge of a field at night. You can see the first few meters, the grass, the dark shape of a tree. Beyond that, nothing. Not empty. Just continuing quietly past the reach of light. Still there, still itself, patient in the way that things are patient when they have no need to be found. The Mariana Trench is approximately 180 million years old. That number will slide past you if you let it. Most numbers that large do. So don't try to hold it whole. Take a small piece of it. 1 million years. A million years ago, our ancestors were already here, already walking, already making things with their hands, already in some form gathered around something warm, looking at the dark beyond it. The trench is 180 of those. Before the first bird existed, the trench was already old. Before the first flower opened, on any hillside on Earth, the trench had already been deepening. For tens of millions of years, the dinosaurs rose, lived, vanished. The trench continued, a few centimeters deeper every year, not patient like a person, waiting for something to end, patient like a stone, like something that has no concept of waiting, no concept of time passing. That simply continues the same motion. It is always made because that is what it is. The oldest tree you can imagine. You cannot see the top from here. The bark worn smooth by more seasons than you could count in a lifetime of counting. Still standing, still somewhere deep inside it, quietly, growing. Even the water does not stay. The water that enters the trench does not stay there forever. The plates that are subducting, the Pacific plate, slowly sliding beneath the Mariana plate, carry water with them, down into the mantle, into rocks so hot that the distinction between solid and liquid becomes complicated. And eventually, over time scales that make the age of the trench seem recent, that water returns through volcanic activity, through slow geological release, as steam first, then vapor, then cloud, then rain, water that was pressed under 11 kilometers of ocean, carried into the mantle, held in rock for millions of years, rises again, falls on a field somewhere, on a forest, on the roof of a house, in a city that did not exist. The last time that water saw the sky, you would not know. There is no way to know. Water carries no memory of where it has been, but it has been somewhere. Rain on a window. At night, the soft, irregular sound of it, each drop arriving separately, finding the glass and resting there a moment before continuing wherever water goes. Next, the trench is not finished. This is easy to forget. We think of the deep things as done, as formed, as set, as permanent, in the way that only very old things seem permanent. But the trench is still being made right now, this moment. As you lie here, as the room is dark around you, the Pacific plate is pressing beneath the Mariana plate. A few centimeters this year, a few centimeters next year. The deepest point on Earth is deeper tonight than it was when your parents were born. Not by much, not by anything you could measure with the instruments in your hands, but deeper. The world still making itself in the dark, under pressure, in the cold, in the silence, not hurrying, not waiting to be finished, just continuing the way breathing continues while you sleep. Not because you decided, not because you remember to, but because the body simply keeps going, quietly in the dark. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the water above is not something you would feel as weight. Not the way you feel a heavy coat. Not the way you feel a hand pressing down. It has been there so long, and the body has been there so long with it, that the pressure outside and the pressure inside have become the same thing. Molecule for molecule, inside and out. The body does not resist it. The body has become it. Scientists call this equilibrium, the inside matching the outside, so precisely that there is nothing left to push against. Nothing pushing in, nothing pushing back. Just the same. A stone in a wall, mortar pressed around it for 100 years. At some point, you cannot say where the stone ends and the wall begins. And that floor, the one we imagine as flat, is not flat at all. We imagine it that way. A great flat plane at the bottom of everything. Even, still, featureless. But the floor of the Mariana Trench is not flat. It has ridges, valleys inside the valley, mountains that have never seen light, rising from a floor that has never seen light, into water that has never seen light. To map it, scientists send sound downward. A pulse, traveling at 1,500 meters per second, through water that has not moved in a very long time. It reaches the floor. It bounces back. And in the time it takes to return, 7-8 seconds, a shape is revealed. Not flatness. A ridge here. A slope there. A seamount rising silently from a plane no one has ever seen. 7 seconds of silence between the sending and the returning, and in that silence, a mountain no one has ever seen, in a place that did not wait to be found. The Mariana Trench existed before the first human being drew a breath. It will exist long after the last one, when a submersible descends into it, taking months to plan, years to build, hours to fall. The trench does not register it. The water parts. The submersible passes. The water closes again, as if nothing came, as if nothing left. The sediment on the floor was not disturbed by the fact of our curiosity. The pressure did not shift. The temperature did not change. The dark did not notice. A cathedral in which a single mote of dust drifted through the light. If there were light, and settled, and was still, and the cathedral went on as before. There are other cathedrals. The Mariana Trench is the deepest, but it is not the only one. There are more than 30 Hadal trenches scattered across the floor of the ocean. The Tonga Trench, the Kermadec, the Philippine, the Kuril-Kamchatka, each one made the same way. A plate sliding beneath another plate, the ocean floor bending downward under the weight of that slow collision. A seam opening. It has been happening since long before anything lived here to witness it. And it is happening now. 30 dark lines, pressed into the floor of the earth. 30 places where something yielded quietly at the edges of things. Too slow to see, too slow to feel. 30 lines, still in the dark. And most of what lies along those lines has never been touched. Most of the floor of the Mariana Trench has never been touched. No instrument, no camera, no human hand. Not once. We have seen photographs of a small fraction of it, collected sediment from a handful of sites. The rest simply is the same sediment that settled there 10,000 years ago, 100,000, a million, undisturbed. There is very little left on this earth that has not been named, photographed, measured, or changed by the fact of us. But down there, the same cold, the same dark, the same floor, sitting quietly, in the condition it was always in. The same sediment, the same cold, the same dark. Inside that sediment, something is living. In the sediment at the bottom of the trench, there are bacteria that have been there for millions of years. Not the same bacteria, their descendants, generation after generation. In the cold, in the dark, under a pressure that would collapse anything not built for it, and they are built for it. Their cell membranes are molecularly different from bacteria living in sunlight, restructured over millions of generations so that the pressure outside does not tear them open. They do not use sunlight. There is none. They eat sulfur compounds instead, the faint chemical traces of things that drifted down from 11 kilometers above. A single metabolic cycle, one slow turn of chemistry, may take decades. Decades. Not struggling through those decades, not waiting for them to end, just in them. The cold around them, the dark around them, the pressure outside and inside, the same. A faint pulse in the sediment, once every few decades, still there. Above that sediment, the water goes on for a very long time. Sunlight enters the ocean. In clear water, it reaches perhaps 200 meters. Blue light deepest. Red fading first, then orange, then green, until only blue remains. And then nothing. By 500 meters, it is completely dark. At 11 kilometers, the last photon of sunlight was absorbed. 10 kilometers above the floor, there is no light at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. There has not been for as long as the trench has existed. And yet, Some of the creatures living there still have eyes. Not well-developed eyes. Vestigial, perhaps. Carried forward through millions of generations in the dark. Scientists are not certain why. They are still working on that. But the eyes are there. Small, pale, turned toward nothing. Carried down generation by generation into a dark that has not changed in 60 million years. A small pale eye in the dark, still there. That eye is resting on a floor that is still moving. The subduction zone. The place where one plate slides beneath another is one of the most violent places on Earth. Volcanoes rise above it. Earthquakes begin along it. Mountains are pushed upward by the force of that slow collision. But at the trench itself, at the very deepest point of the plate's descent, it is quiet. The violence happens elsewhere. The trench is what remains. After the force is past, a long, still record of pressure that found a direction 60 million years ago and has not stopped since. The cold floor, the dark water above it, the plate beneath it, still moving, a few centimeters a year. Too slow to measure, without instruments, too slow to feel, but moving. The trench deepening by almost nothing every year, still being made. And the water inside it, that same water, is changed by being there. Water resists being compressed more than almost any other substance. It holds its shape. But at 11 kilometers down, under the full weight of the ocean above, it yields slightly. The same molecules, the same water that falls as rain, that moves through rivers, that sits in a glass beside a bed. At that depth, those molecules are pressed 5% closer together than they are at the surface. 5%. It is not much. You would not see it. You would not feel it. But it is there. The same water holding itself a little more tightly in the dark. A glass of water on a table. The same molecules. Somewhere, once, pressed quietly together under 11 kilometers of ocean. Now here, still, nothing reaches it really. The seasons do not reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench. At 11 kilometers down, the temperature does not change between January and July. It is always just above freezing. It has been for millions of years. At the surface, the ocean shifts. Storms form and dissolve. The water warms in summer, cools in autumn. Ice forms at the poles and retreats again. Down there, nothing changes. The same temperature, the same pressure, the same dark. January, July, no difference. A place that has never known the turning of a year, that does not know what a year is. Only this same cold, this same still water, this same dark, always. Into that dark, things have been falling for a very long time. The Mariana Trench is one of the largest carbon sinks on Earth. Everything that dies in the ocean above, the tiny creatures, the marine snow, the slow drift of organic matter, falling for weeks through 11 kilometers of water, arrives at the bottom and stays. The pressure keeps it there. The cold keeps it there. The darkness keeps it there. Carbon that was once part of something living. A shell, a fin, a body too small to name. Now resting in the sediment at the bottom of everything. Not decaying the way things decay in sunlight. Not returning to the surface. Just settling quietly into the floor. Scientists estimate that Hadal trenches store a disproportionately large amount of the ocean's carbon, far more than their size would suggest. The trench receiving everything that fell, held there in the cold and the dark for millions of years. A place where things arrive and do not leave. The sediment growing millimeter by millimeter over time too long to hold in mind. Something that was once alive, now still in the dark, at the bottom of everything. And now the stars are out. We traveled far tonight, past the body that became the pressure. Inside and outside, the same. Past the sound traveling downward through still water, and the mountain revealed in the silence of its return. Past the 30 dark lines, pressed quietly into the floor of the earth. Past the pale eye, carried down generation by generation into a dark that never changed. Past the faint pulse in the cold sediment, once every few decades. Past the water in a glass. The same molecules once held a little more closely together, somewhere far below. Past the things that fell and did not return. Resting now in the sediment, in the dark. Let your breath slow now. Let the images soften. The deepest point on earth, still being made, too slow to know. Sleep well, and thank you for dreaming with us. If this brought you rest, we'll be here again.